Good evening, YouTube. Thank you for checking out my video here. This is actually my first video that I will record for the Disposable Dad channel. Disposable Dad. What does that term mean to you? It means that fathers don't always get the benefit of the doubt when they're raising a child on their own. Some bad things have happened to me that were certainly unwarranted, definitely unjust, and I have a feeling I'm not the only person that's had that happen to. So, I would like to introduce you to my story and find out, is there any other fathers out there, single dads, that have had any similar experiences? And this isn't limited just to the male gender or sex. This is for any single parent who has had quote-unquote interference by grandparents. That's really what this is aimed at. So let me begin. I was a single dad. I raised my child from 9 months old to about the age 13, 14 and a half. What had happened for me was very unique, very unexpected, and a disaster. So my child had been a great person, very energetic and loving, but also a little domineering, and I don't know where he gets that from. Okay, so maybe I'm a little domineering at times. But I want him to be open-minded about things, to be able to learn. My child is the one who would be, I already know how to do that. I'm going to teach him how to swim. You know, the very first time, he already knows. Doesn't need to listen to anybody. Well, I knew that would be a problem going to school. It wasn't for elementary school, but at the end of secondary school, we had some issues. My child would never do homework. Always tell me it was done and he was doing well. Fortunately, I was very involved in the school. I knew the counselor, but gosh, I would come in and it would almost be weekly to bi-weekly at the latest. So everyone there knew who I was. This was actually such a problem that I had asked my own mother, my son's grandmother, to attend some of these parent-teacher conferences with me. And this wasn't in elementary school as much as it was in the secondary. And surprisingly, my mother told me, no, I'm not going. I said, well, what about Dad? He's not going either. Well, what? Why? The answer I received from them was very telling to what my predicament is today. She said no because it would appear to my child that we were all ganging up on him. Now, this is an opportunity for every teacher of one student to come together with the student and the responsible adults in his life to help plan and understand what's going on in school. So with my mother's refusal to participate in that, I had wonderful godparents that stepped in their stead. The issue was the grandparents had no idea about how my child was lying about grades, school, homework, and how I had to follow up after his every moment. So it became an issue when I started restricting him from video games and his phone because his disrespect and his grades had gotten to a certain bad level. I actually grounded him for 3 weeks for lying. It turned out I was having... Actually, this is ironic. I was having brunch with my mother and father. I would meet them once or twice a week during my lunch period to, have a cup of coffee with them. And unbeknownst to me, they were working with my younger brother and having him call CPS with allegations of abuse. This was happening while I was starting to ground my boy from things that mattered to him, because obviously he's too old to spank. I found out you really have to get their attention, you gotta teach them video games, cell phones. The technology of today is not, it's not an entitlement. You have to earn that. If you're not getting an allowance, then you better earn it in other ways. Clean this, clean that. I asked him, clean dishes. He would say, no, you do it. That's pretty bad. Certainly, if I had done that in my parents' house, they would bring the whip out. When I say whip, I mean the belt. My mother would order my father to bring the belt out and whip us whenever we were back talking or, were a problem. So, I was letting them know during lunches that, hey, I'm having this issue with my son. He's not being engaged in school as he should be. He's not doing homework and lying about it. And the answer was, we don't know that. We have not seen that. I said, you haven't seen it because you haven't gone into any parent conference meeting. And then they said, well, you know what? The disrespect you're talking about, we don't see that when he's with us. Should have been a sign there. That was my mother. She's a narcissist. In other words, well, that's you as a bad parent. We're golden. The kid does great. So, during that time, like I said, my younger brother was calling CPS, and there were just out of the blue. I've all of a sudden, I get phone calls. Mr. Melendez, we would like to meet with you, so-and-so. Where's your son? Okay, let's talk. And so they would ask me, they say, we got a complaint about you abusing your child. I know nothing about this. And honestly, it was coming out of left field. I had no idea. So they would do their investigation, or that wasn't an investigation. That term means something to the Social Services Division. It was an assessment. Came back unfounded. It happened a second time, and they didn't come back as unfounded as well. So I'm telling my parents, hey, look, this is going on. It's crazy. I don't know what's going on. I asked my son. He says, I don't know anything about what's going on with that. I don't know anything about that. Meanwhile, remember, this was my younger brother doing this. Obviously, my parents had known. So, we were off on spring break together. It was, a nice time. I always take my vacations at work to correspond with my sons because I do everything. I'm the dad, and when he's off for a week, especially as a teenager, you don't want to have them home alone necessarily. So I stayed home with them. And then, I made sure he would do chores around the house. And he was blowing me off all week long. And then on that Thursday, I had enough, for spring break a year ago. I said, look, you're going to clean these dishes. And he goes, well, I didn't eat them. I only have one dish that's dirty in there. I'm like, no, you got some more than that, but that's besides the point. I clean the dishes. I clean up after you all the time. You're getting to an age where you've got to start being responsible for yourself. So I had him clean the dishes, or that was my intention. As a first parent who is very lenient on his child, so granted some of that will fall on me, I don't like grounding and punishing my child because, frankly, when he's grounded, I'm grounded. I can't leave to stay, and monitor him. So I told him, look, I don't care when you get them done. Just get them done. Doesn't matter what time, just get them done, and you got 9 o'clock or bedtime to have them done by, period. This way, he can make the quote-unquote adult decision and figure out for himself what would be the best time to do this duty. So this was about 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock, I checked in on him, and he goes, yeah, I'm still on this level in a video game, so I'm busy. I'll get it done, though. Okay, no problem. A little later, it's 7 o'clock, same story. I said, hey, this needs to be done tonight. By the time it became 10 o'clock and I came to check on him, I'm like, it's bedtime. You need to get those dishes done. I'm too tired. I'm going to sleep. So I yanked his little butt up out of bed, just grabbed his arm, said, nope, you're going to clean these dishes, and then you're going to go to bed. So he ran to the house, blah, 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 blah. I called the police. Later that night, they came and arrested me for abuse on a domestic or a family partner. I was stunned, obviously. One of the reasons why is it was on spring break. It was on a Thursday night. I didn't have to work the next day. I had been drinking some beers during this period. They took me in. The next day, they asked, where can your son stay with the grandparents? while we handle this, because now CPS is in there and they're saying, hey, we had previous complaints about you set up by my family. But obviously I didn't know that for sure at the time. I suspected it, and they can't tell you, and you are not allowed to know. Anyone can accuse you of abusing a child. Anyone. And they have to check that out. So I'm not against them for doing their due diligence. However, that does wear off if they are going beyond what justice would be. So I said, yeah, that's fine. I let my son stay with the grandparents while I'm going through assessment. They're saying, oh, you were drinking that night. We're going to send you to substance abuse. You got to go to fathers and train. All this stuff because I wanted my kid to just do the dishes, you know? That's when I found out my brother and my mother had pictures of bruises on him that they accounted to me that said I would beat him. I had no clue. I mean, and I would suspect if any family, a real family out there, had suspected one of their members to abuse a child, they would obviously have a conversation about that. It would not be a passing thing. Mine, no. My mother loves my kid. He's gorgeous. He's a beautiful little boy, just sweet. At first, as he gets older, he's learning from my parents that he is a victim. He is entitled. Very difficult for any father, especially a single father, to handle parents that are actually working against the best interest of the child, protecting that child from being accountable to the father. And I don't mean making sure that kid's not being beaten. No. I'll go a little retro on this. I told my son I'd rather have him earn income and allowance for doing good deeds rather than having things taken away from him. So we made a chore chart. Now, granted, my kid's 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old at the time, about that time frame. He told me, okay, well, what's the deal? How are we going to do this? I told him, well, I'll give him $1 for this and $1 for this. Minor stuff. Like, you know, you make your bed in the morning, that's $1. You make your bed every day, so that's $5 right there. You do the dishes every day, that's $1. $10 for just making the bed, doing the dishes. That's all I was looking for. Nothing major. He said, that's not enough money. He told me to my face, that is not enough money. I was beside myself. For about a week, I always let my son visit with his grandparents every Friday night. So they would pick him up from school, take him out, have fun, and he would come back Saturday. You know, not in the morning, but in the afternoon, evening, after they had all their fun. So my parents are now the fun people, while Daddy is trying to reel this kid in. This is the problem that I'm worried about the most, is when my child gets to that point of age where they're accountable for themselves and they just say, no, I'm right and you're wrong, period. That's an issue. So I went to pick him up on a Saturday, and this draws back to where I'm concerned about the fact my kid told me it wasn't enough money for him to do his responsibilities. When I had went out, started my car, came back in, my father had money in his hand, and he was hiding it from me. You could just tell it was kind of tucked in the fingers in a certain way, something like, like tucked in there and kind of to the side. So I was like, what's that? And my mother said in Spanish, dale su dinero, which, forgive me for real Spanish people there. That means, that's gringo for give him the money. And that wasn't for me, that was Chase. So my father kind of reached around behind his back, gave my child, this money. I said, so I got Chase in the car, and then I went back in to address my parents on their grandparental roles, not to override me raising my child. And they said, look, we don't want to give it in front of you because you'll get mad. I said, I'll get mad. Yes, I'll get mad. This is part of the incentive for him. He has no incentive to work. Turned out they gave him $20. So I don't blame him. $10 a week is nothing when I get $20 a week to visit with grandparents, and Pop-Pop. Grandma and Pop-Pop, Friday night, Saturday morning. He gets $20 for one evening and a day. So, completely undermined. I told Chase, look, here's the deal. Since obviously it's not enough money for you to earn, because I'm not made of cash. I mean, I'm working a job that pays well, thank goodness. We have a nice home in a good neighborhood. And I can't afford to spoil this kid for two reasons. One, I'm responsible for him, and I don't want to bring a jackass into this society. Two, hey, single dad, I ain't rolling in it. I'm making enough money to make ends meet and sometimes scraping by. So, I hope that puts into perspective the things that I was dealing with my parents and my son. So you've got my mother saying she won't attend anything that has to do with Chase's learning. Nothing. Won't want to hear anything about him being in trouble, or because I would tell him when he'd get in trouble. It wasn't often, but there were a couple times he got in trouble and he didn't let me know about it. In other words, he was just lying to me and would make his, get detention, serve it the next day, probably forged my name on the detention slip because I didn't see it. So I've got my own parents working against me. At this time, I don't know it is Eric, my younger brother, but I suspect this is where it's coming from. And we'll go into the reasons why that was on another stream, another cast, if you will. So I went to jail that night. I told CPS that I have no problem with them staying with my grandparents. I mean, his grandparents, my parents, for a little while because I trusted them. I was having lunch with them. I did not know there was conspiracy or conspiring going behind my back to destroy me as a dad. So it was about 2 weeks into the investigation. Not investigation again. There was no evidence that CPS had to say it was an investigation. It was an assessment. My son was claiming that he had blood in his mouth. I saw the picture. There was some blood in his mouth. Absolutely no bruising. Nothing. No contusions at all. So I punched this kid in the face. I'm 5'8", 5'9", not a big guy. 210, 215. I'm a big guy that way. There's no way I'm punching a child, 80, 90, 100-pound kid in the face and not leaving some damage. There was no contusions or anything. I should have fought that, and I didn't, because I've got a job with certain clearances, and I don't want to have this, affect my ability to earn a paycheck. So my mother filed for custody of my son. Didn't talk to me about it. I was beside myself because up until this point, I was still talking with them. I'd come to their house and they'd be like, we're only going to have him for a little bit until this gets done. That was a lie. My mother was lying. She had every intention of taking my child because she is Wonder Mom. And she's got to save my kid from being responsible. So she filed for custody of my son. I got served with the paperwork. Now, when CPS is having meetings with me, before they can not adjudicate, but before they can close the case, they want to have it heard in court. My mother, she had already hired an attorney, so they were set. They knew the game plan really well. She spent some money to tear me down as a single parent. This is my own family. I want to be sure I emphasize this point more than any. They never, ever addressed with me that Chase was making these claims. They never, ever spoke with people that were involved in my home to find out what the truth is. My mother, who my child owns, he owns her. She took him at his word, and she went all out, telling him whatever she told him. She obviously told me this was a temporary thing while filing for custody of my child and then saying she wanted 50%. I was like, no, you're not. You're never going to be his mom. His mom chose to not participate. You are not going to, after 13 years of me doing this on my own, become someone I got to clear things with. No. So, it was not good. I got to tell you. CPS now, instead of closing the case after I did their substance abuse program so well that I actually was able to support other folks in the group, they named me a mentor. Then I went to the Fathers in Training, we still talk today, the group people. That was a great program. I enjoyed participating in it. I wasn't like being forced to, but it was a positive thing, and we did really well. We were able to communicate, and I certainly gave advice and received advice. It was nice to be in an environment that single dads were for. It's a shame that the environment for single dads to get together is on threat of losing their child. Went through all that. Next thing you know, we have our court case for custody. Figure this is going to close everything out. Now this was 2018. We have the court case come in, and instead of trying the court case that day, because my mother has a attorney, she's hiring to tear her son down as a piece of shit dad. Well, they said they were going to have to continue this because it's a contested. In other words, we could have ended there. My son could have come home. We would have been happy, moved on. No. She's so narcissistic, and so controlling. She's like, no, we're going to take this farther than that. Next thing you know, I get another court date. And you know how the courts work here. It is not in your best interests as far as trying to get things done in a timely fashion. My child obviously is enjoying living with my parents. They bought him a PlayStation 4. Maybe not my parents alone. My brothers and my parents bought him a PlayStation 4. They bought him a brand new bike. Next thing you know, he's coming in the greatest duds. He's got new clothes. He is the stuff. He's a victim. I'm shocked. But I wasn't shocked when it was continued and Chase says, I want to live with them. No doubt. He doesn't have to clean a dish. Doesn't have to pick up. Heaven forbid. If he gets failing grades, he's still going to be able to be online playing video games and doing his thing. That was an issue for me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to fight the good fight. Screw that. There's no way I'm cutting 50-50 with grandma that thinks she's the best parent in the world, yet doesn't support her kid or her grandkid by going to parent-teacher conferences because she's worried it would hurt their feelings. No, that's not the country we live in today. That's not the times we live in today. So, I figured, hey, I'm fighting this. They assigned a guardian ad litem to my child. And instead of me doing my due diligence and meeting with the GAL first and letting them know what's happened, I was very passive. I figured, this is an open and shut case. They have no claim to my son. This is not the mother saying, I want this child, and we've been involved in the growth of him. Not at all. This is the grandparents. This is a third party coming in saying, we want to ditch the dad. Two things went bad for me on that. First, it was my own family that turned their back and betrayed me. My own family. The second is, I'm a single dad. I'm not married. Girlfriend doesn't spend the night, although she's here quite a bit. That didn't matter. So when the guardian ad litem came over the very first day, he goes, why does your family hate you? I knew at that point we had a problem. I knew at that point this was not going to be an unbiased interview. My family, whom I addressed it the very first time he asked this question to me. I said, it's not that they hate me. It's that they love my child more. And I honestly believe that. I believe they love this kid more than they love me. And I knew that. That was true. My mother. And it's not my dad so much, folks. I want to let you know, happy wife, happy life type of thing. My dad is the man. He's in great shape. He does well. He worked. She took care of the kids. But she calls the shots. He can only come and visit on his own if she approves it. He does what he's told by her. And that's to a fault. This was wrong and he knew it. So, my family, my father, and obviously my brother, whom, like I said, I'll address that at a later point in my channel, had gone against me. the Garden of Letterman made his decision at this point. So we had our interview. He asked me 4 times, why do your parents hate you? Why does your family hate you? And every time I told him, it's not that he hates me. Would you stop that? This is because they love my kids more. They want to take my child. Grandma wants to be a mom again. She wants to come out of retirement, She's the best. However, I don't think that fell on any ears that were listening. It fell on deaf ears. So every time the Garden of Len would come to my house, he would say, this house is too messy. Like, my kid has lived here all his life. It's not too messy. I'm a single dad. I work every day. I pick up after myself as much as I can. Granted, I could do a better job. I would love to be able to hire a maid, but I'm a single dad. 1 income, 1 child. He told the courts I was a hoarder. That was his first report. I was a hoarder. I knew it was in deep trouble then. I couldn't hire an attorney because I'm here, I'm doing the work, doing everything I can to take care of my kid, but it wasn't like I built up a savings to fight my family for my son. So I didn't have those resources. I go in the court. My mom's got her attorney. She's like, this person, meaning me, is not a suitable dad. He's a hothead. He's arrogant. He abuses his kid. I'm thinking, oh my God, my mom's gone all out. She may not have said these things to me, but she certainly okayed this attorney to say things about me that no one would ever say. No one who knew me. Even my parents, as bad as they are, would never have said that themselves, I thought, at that point. So here I am in court and I represent myself. The first witness they called to the stand, because now we're going through this little trial thing, was my brother. The one who was calling CPS. Now pay attention to this. It's kind of important, relevant fact to the case. He was calling CPS on the abuse that I was doing to my child. So he told the court some dastardly things, obviously wrong, when the attorney was, talking to him, asking him questions. They're really trying to bury me. So I cross-examined. I did really well. First question I asked was, or this is how I stated it, you've told the court some very egregious, negligent, abusive things that you've accused me of as a parent to the child. Let me start off with the first question so we can have some context to those claims that you've made. When was the last time you saw me and my son interact in person? All of a sudden, got quiet. He said, not many. Thank God he didn't lie. Wait for the grandmother to do that. I said, oh, really? So, and I picked this up from the other attorney, instead of asking for specifics, ask for generalities to dial them in. I said, so would you say it was 3 to 5 times in the last 5 years? He goes, yeah. I said, more like 3 times, correct? He said, that's about right. I said, but nothing in the last 2 years, correct? He said, yes. I then followed that up with, so, all of these claims you've made, did you take the opportunity to speak with that father and verify these stories, or try to do anything to adjust or address this issue? Or did you just take a 14-year-old child's word who was grounded for 3 weeks for lying? And he was like, I've seen you mad, blah, blah. I was, answer the question. So, I dismissed him. They bring my father, they bring my brother. I asked my brother on the stand, is my son in danger around me being at my home? This is my older brother. He goes, no. I asked my father if he believed the same thing, and he said no. So anyways, closing statements came. My mother had, I don't know what she's doing. She's obviously, I'm a son of a bitch, literally. She had, her attorney came out and said that my child would sleep with his shoes on and a go bag packed. A go bag. I almost had to look that up, but I've seen enough, drug movies or whatever where they got to get out, they got to go, they got to pack their bag. It's such bullshit. Let me tell you, this entire audience, I would love it if this spread viral, but I will tell you, that boy that I love so much, that the attorney said slept with a go bag packed, up until the day before, would go to my bed in the middle of the night to fall asleep with me. And he would always ask me to hold him and cuddle him. And of course, this is a sweet child. This is before, well, he started to smell. But before that, he didn't really smell. He was okay. But when they get to an age, you gotta take him off the nipple. Gotta take him off the teat. So it was something I wanted to do. I hadn't done yet. That being said, every night that he was in my house, he would come in just to snuggle into bed with his daddy. My mother's attorney said he would sleep in his own bed with his socks on and a go bag packed. Lies. My mother lied. Fortunately, when I did my not my cross-examination, my closing statements, I said, Your Honor, the grandmother did not raise this child. I did it on my own. I love this child. I know we're going to hit problems and bumps as when he becomes a teenager. I did not assume that the grandmother and grandfather were going to run interference and undermine me. To break up a single man from the child that he raised on his own would be awful. And I kind of just stood down. Well, no, I did say, another thing I'd like to say, because the other attorney, the prosecuting attorney, or whatever you want, I didn't know what they referred to as, made these claims of my son sleeping with a go bag packed. I said, that is absolutely outrageous. And I made sure I looked at her. That's outrageous. And I turned to the judge. She proved no evidence of that. And I can tell you for a fact that is a lie. And I rested my case. The judge took a few minutes to deliberate, came back, and they pulled everybody in. And the first thing he said is, I am not going to grant custody to the grandparents. I was all of a sudden relieved. He said, but he's been with them for X amount of months now, which had been like 7 months. So I don't want to mess things up because this court case was in May and school finishes in mid-June. He goes, I want to leave him in this state, in this visitation, until the end of June, or mid-June, until school is over, essentially. He said, then I'll give you every other weekend through July, and after that, every other week through August. We meet back on September 3rd, and we'll close it out. Depending on how you do, you get your son back, and this is done. I'm like, yes, done. I beat this attorney. I did well. I cross-examined. I did all these things. I was proud of myself. September 3rd comes around. New judge. Not the same guy. I said, Your Honor, we already made this decision in May. What's changed? He goes, that's not a final order. I said, really? The decision stated merging this child back to his father where he should be. Is that not going to be taken into consideration? He said that wasn't a final order. Do you want to contest this? I said, yes. They retried me. This time, they didn't bring any other witnesses because I hammered them. They had nothing. No one asked me anything. No one talked to me from them. They did this because they believed a 14-year-old kid who was grounded from his video games and his cell phone. We'll go on the cell phone, too. Let me tell you this. I told my boy he had to answer my calls, he'd answer my texts when he's moved over to the grandparents because they were watching him for me while I went through this, basically planning on kidnapping my kid legally. He said, okay. Later that day, they dropped the cell phone that I was paying for him off at my house. My older brother gave him an iPhone and said, "This is yours. This is yours. You don't answer to me on that. You don't answer to anybody." Basically, screw your dad. He wants you to answer him? If you feel like it. It's a lot of power to give to a 14, 15-year-old kid. I wish I had that power. My dad would be in jail still. My mom, maybe on death row. Just being facetious there. So anyways, they retried me. Didn't call any other witnesses because I'd blow them up. One thing I didn't expect, I was not prepared for, and it was my failure to not be prepared, was they called my own mother, my blood mother, the one who raised me. This kid who honor roll in, elementary school, honor roll in high school, got his, finally, as an adult, as a single dad, earned his bachelor's degree at night school, trying to do the best he can for his child. My mother told the courts that when my son would visit me, I wouldn't feed him. I would make, quote-unquote, exotic meals. Exotic meals. So that if he did not want to eat them, tough, he would go hungry. A flat-out, blatant lie. I don't know where that came from. I would never make a meal and tell my kid, "You're going to eat that or not." If he didn't like it, I usually made something small for him. My parents actually set that in motion because when I was their kid, they would say, "You eat it or you go to bed hungry." They literally accused me of doing the things they did that I did not do. She lied straight, flat out to the courts. She asked my mother the next question. How does my son refer to you at home? The answer was, he calls me Mom. Oh my God, that is such complete bullshit. He does never call her Mom. He calls her G-Ma. He's called her G-Ma for like 10 years. Another lie. Another lie. I realize now I'm in trouble. I don't have a professional attorney. I don't have legal counsel. I'm representing myself. My mother is lying to me. The courts are going to listen to this mother who, a good mother, would never. She would have addressed this issue outside of courts. When I try to talk to my mother about it, my dad would step in for it and say, "We'll deal with it in court." So that lets you know what kind of parent she is. I'm in trouble. I started making notes. I was like, "Oh my God, this is a lie. This is a lie." Jotting down. And then the judge says, after this questioning, which eviscerated me, she even said that I would not allow him to call my parents while he was here. Bullshit. He has his own room with his video game system and bunk beds. It was awesome. He had a killer place. I did not monitor any of his phone calls. And they were like, "Well, he would not let him talk to us." Lie, lie, lie. This is how you steal a child in today's society in America. If you're a grandparent. Maybe if you're just somebody who cares about the kid. I don't know. Certainly the issue here isn't who's doing the claiming. It's who's defending themselves. If I had been a single mother, this wouldn't have happened. If I had been married, certainly my wife would have told him that was bullshit. My girlfriend was there, fortunately, and I didn't ask my mom any questions really after that, because the judge was like, "Well, be careful. If you don't know the answer, you may not want to ask the question." I don't even remember what I asked her. There's a couple things, and she was gone. She didn't look me in the eye because she lied about me. And if she didn't lie, it's because she didn't know better. Willful ignorance is still lying. And we can go into that further on a future episode, if you care to listen to what I have to say. And contribute, please. I don't want this to be just about me, but I figure if I want people to contribute input to this channel, I want them to express themselves or feel comfortable expressing themselves after I've laid it all out. This is a big deal. This is the first time I've ever made a stream that I intended to go further with, just rather than notes to myself that I can come back to later. So, I let her off the hook. I had my best friend and my girlfriend come in and defend me, and they said all these great things about who I was. Obviously, I was not this evil person that my mother claimed I was. And when I tried to bring into the fact that my mother would not go to any parent-teacher conferences because she was so worried that even that would make my child be mad at her. And the judge says, well, that's hearsay. I'm like, he was literally at the meetings in place of the people that want to take my kid. He's contributed more in the upbringing as far as being a real parent, not just, here's milk and cookies, let's get rid of this guy, and I'm now a mom again. So, I don't know if that was caught into consideration or not. I did complain about the guardian ad litem because he said my house was a hoarder, and I had an extra cat that I had rescued, so I put that cat in the vacant room where my son used to sleep, and he said, well, I would have my kid come back and clean up the cat litter box and poo in there, and that would be punishment for him because I'm a terrible dad. That's the guardian ad litem. I made that complaint, so when the guardian ad litem came up, originally he said, I recommend 50-50, which I said I'm not agreeing to because I can't 50%, raise my kid with literally a negative 50% that worships the ground he walks on. I'm his dad, and to my mom, she's his dad. He's her dad. He says what's what. They don't dare say boo to my kid. I got no problem saying boo to him. So the judge came in, and not the judge, the guardian ad litem went from 50-50 on his closing statements was that I should have limited visitation, custody going to the grandparents. Remember, I raised this kid on my own for 14 years, and this jackass, guardian ad litem, because I called him out in court, took his revenge. He said, give the father once a month visitation, no overnights, supervised. What kind of bullshit is that? What kind of bullshit is that? I wiped this baby's ass by myself. He got sick in the middle of the night with croup. I'm the one taking him to the emergency room, not his grandmother. I did everything with him. Everything. He was my life. And the guardian ad litem said that bullshit. Now we get to my mother's attorney. My son is in danger. If you order him to go back home, he's going to run away. I found out, or I didn't find out, I suspected this was the meeting my child had with their attorney to plan on him getting the dream thing for any teenager. A grandmother that'll kiss his ass, never say boo, and a dad who can't say shit. So she had said, we're generous. We're willing to give every other weekend, but if you think it is right, supervised once a month, that's not out of the question. We'd agree to that. But we're so generous. This isn't about libeling the dad. We just want what's best for this child. Closed. It's my turn to come up. I said, Your Honor, I honestly don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I've raised this child on my own. And he said, well, obviously he had already talked to my child for about maybe 10 minutes before the court case happened. And he says, I've already talked to your son. He wants to live with Grandma and Pop-Pop. I said, no doubt. That's because he can run that house over there. He goes, what happens if I order him to come back home to you? My response was, he will respect the decision of the court. He needs to be with his father. There's no biological mother here. That mother did not raise him. In fact, she caused more problems than someone who actually wanted to help grow this child into a proper adult. Now, I didn't say that. I mean, this is going on behind, my head, going in my head. And then he asked again, well, what would happen? I said, Your Honor, he would respect the judgment of this court. He goes, okay. I knew I was in trouble. They dismissed us for a recess, called us back. My parents got custody of my child. He came to my house right after the court case and cleared his beautiful room out of all the goodies. Got everything. He's not my kid anymore. My parents kidnapped him legally, and he's loving it. It's more of a runaway situation than it is kidnapping, because I don't blame any child, a teenager whose brain isn't fully developed yet. Their number one thing generally is themselves. I don't blame them for doing what he did. I don't blame him for that. I blame my parents, who should have known better. They should have at least talked to me. They didn't. To this day, as I speak to you today, this is about 5 months, 4 months after this happened. Never mentioned it, never talked about it, never asked me anything, just went and took my kid. And lied to do it and hired a lawyer to lie on their behalf. My mother literally cock-blocked me when I defended myself well enough that my kid was coming home. She had to come out with some outrageous lies, and she did. So, things didn't go well for me after that, as you can imagine. Believe it or not, I was probably in shock the next day because I had to give a pretty big presentation to a government group in D.C., and I'm out of, the Norfolk Naval area. I do all my work. I work with the military there. I'm more of a consultant / vendor / partner with a lot of these commands. So they wanted me to do something in D.C. I went to D.C. I figured this is good. It's only going to be a day. I'm going to drive up, drive down. We're not going to focus on what happened yesterday. I want to get this done and move on. I gave a hell of a presentation. I was actually patting myself on the back. I can't believe I just lost custody of my son, and here I am giving a knockout presentation. It hit me later that week. I didn't get out of bed from Friday to Monday. Monday morning, I got out of bed. I decided I was going to fill my bathtub up with warm water, slit my wrists, and go to sleep. This is because when you put in 14 years, 15 years of this life, you see a baby, they come out so small, you can hold them in the palm of one hand. Turn into this teenager, and you did everything you needed to do in between. And he loved you so much. He did love me. I love my son. I did everything I could with him and for him. But I didn't want to spoil him. That's something my parents had no problem doing. So when you lose something like that, you're not hanging out with the friends and the fellas and having a good time, going to the bars and the clubs. So when it hit me, I realized I have a beautiful house, empty. I had to grow used to, instead of my son coming into my room in the middle of the night to cuddle, just be held or just be near me because he loved me and he felt safe. That was over. I knew I wanted it to be over, but I wanted this to be something we weaned him off of. Not something where he's saying, you know what, you're an abusive dad, and Grandma saved me. It's terrible. So, obviously, I had a lot going for me, being a person that I am. I'm not I'm the opposite of what my mother claims I was in court. Actually, I've got people that really do care about me, and people that I consider family. No longer do I consider my blood relatives family. They're just relatives, and I'm almost ashamed to say that. But family, and they were keeping tabs on me, and I didn't want to make anything hurt, especially since my son isn't finished high school yet, to deal in this blow of losing his father. Yet, I didn't want to continue. I actually called the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Never called that before, never thought I would. I called them while I was on my way for an emergency appointment with my counselor. And My counselor saw me, and the first thing she asked is, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm in trouble." She knew what that meant. There's something to do when you being white, over 40, single, that raises red flags on suicide. For what it's worth, I'm in that demographic. When I lost my son, I realized maybe this is why the demographic is the way it is. I went and asked for help. I drove myself to the ER, admitted myself for suicidal thoughts, and they took care of me. Fortunately, I was able to go home later that night after several hours, and I participated in a voluntary part-time outpatient program. And it went well. I really made friends in there. It's nice to know you're not the only one suffering. In fact, me losing a kid, that was hard. That was the hardest thing I've had to deal with in my entire life. But there were people that had to deal with worse. So, once I completed that, it was about a week, I did better. And I will mention this. My employer was fantastic. My boss and my boss's boss, oh my God. They were more family than my family. That doesn't say much. I'd say they were as much family as some of my closest friends, the way they handled this. Okay. I don't have my son. I see him every other weekend. Oh, before I close out, let me leave you with this. 2 days after getting home from the outpatient, part-time outpatient program, I got a summons to go to court because my mother filed for child support. And because I make a good income, I was on the hook for like $800 a month to pay my mom for raising my kid. All right, I think that's probably a good place to stop. Maybe you'll want to tune in on the next time I decide to do one of these. Maybe you'll leave some feedback for me as a new YouTuber, but I participate. I always watch certain groups. I'm active in that way. But I have never made a video like this about myself that I wanted to just throw out there and see what happened. So please give me feedback. If you know someone who's suffering because of similar situations, feel free to share this video with them. And I guess what is the other thing? Like and subscribe and click the bell. Yeah, if you click the bell, you probably won't hear from me for another couple weeks at least. But if I get good feedback, I'll be on here sooner. I'd like to have open discussion. I think this is something that we really need to bring out in the world. And it isn't just because I got a bad family. I have a feeling that single fathers don't get a fair shake when it comes to custody of their kids. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching.